Hi, and welcome to Archery Ops Podcast, brought to you by Gold Tip Arrows and Bee Stinger Stabilizers. On each episode, we talk to top experts in archery and bow hunting about what it takes to shoot better and hunt better, target after target, hunt after hunt, shot after shot. I'm your host, Tim Gillingham. Let's roll. We're here for episode 2 of Archery Ops, and pleasure to bring Levi Morgan to you. He's a guy that I think everybody wants to delve into his brain and see what's going on in there and how he really got to where he got. Everybody wants to know that question. They ask me all the time. I ask pretty much everybody in the industry or in any sport, really. People want access, and archery is one of them sports where we do have a little more access to the top level pros. And, we want to, kind of bring Levi's story to you, kind of give him a little bit of leeway to tell you how did he get to where he is today. So welcome aboard, Levi.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Make sure we don't cuss too much and things like that. Nobody's ever heard me cuss on an archery range, though.
Yeah. I try to keep it PG, but sometimes I get pretty frustrated out there. Yeah. Well, I've never seen Tim frustrated.
No, I always say, if you don't, the guys that baffle me are the ones that, they shoot when in. I just remember one time I was shooting our summer games, and Roger Hoyle, he was the current world record FIDA holder at the time. He shoots a 6, and he just there is nothing. I mean, there's no expression. There's no pissed off. It's how does he do that?
Those are the guys that win Vegas.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's because when I miss, my blood pressure goes through the roof, and it takes me 20 minutes to come back down off of that,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just whatever. I think it's just A-B personality. And
you're right. It's all it is. We both read 1,000 books on it and studied it and trying to figure out how in the heck we can get there when we want. And
I think you and I both had to learn how to win completely amped up and completely just zoned and feeling every emotion, feeling every feeling in that tournament.
Ricky Bobby.
Yeah, and there's some guys that do that, and it's like they just go completely brain dead in that moment, And both work. I think it's way harder to learn how to win when you're controlling all those emotions all at once.
Yeah, I mean, I always have thought that, there's some magic out there. There's some technique. The older I get in my career, the more I think about what I would have done different. I'm sure you've probably had that conversation with yourself. I always said, if you don't care, some people just don't. It's obvious. They go out there, they spend a $300 entry fee, all the travel, and they obviously just don't care. And it's just why are you wasting your time?
Yeah. Well, I just think there's two different personalities, and I know, I feel everything when I'm out there. I feel the butterflies on the first arrow, just like I always did. And it takes me a couple to get in the groove, and then whenever it starts to come down to the tournaments on the line, man, it just starts building and building. And I've had to learn to deal with that. Where I think you're the same way, where you learn to harness and use those emotions for positive. But those are the emotions that you see completely just kill people out there in competitions too.
It has to be, because I've watched guys practice, or I watch guys at other levels, and it's just I don't know. Sometimes I get overwhelmed, myself, and I look at, how am I ever going to beat this guy when he's, I watch you go out on a practice course and just annihilate it. And I don't practice that good,
Right.
I really don't. But in the competition, I can live in that moment. And I think that's why I have such a hard time with Vegas, is the fact that it's a predetermined outcome. Okay. And those predetermined outcome style tournaments, it's just when you get I had a guy, Russ Richardson, call me last year. He's like, "What do you do, man? I got so jangled on this bear. He got this big bear, and he made a horrible shot. The guy shoots competition. I don't know, Russ? He's like you. So. He's knocking babies out like they're going out of style right now. So, good guy though, man. I mean, just awesome people. But he got jangled on this bear, and he's like, I said, well, you valued it, okay? When you value something and it's right there in front of you, you go into that protection mode, and it's kind of cliche, all the mental coaches and stuff. Well, you don't have it yet. What are you protecting? And it's easy to say all the things that people experience in archery or any other sport are easy to say, but it is very difficult to create a game plan to combat that.
Yeah. Well, now even Reading is that way, and Vegas and indoor nationals and all these tournaments where you can shoot better than everybody all weekend, but then it's all wiped clean and you go into a sudden death shoot off. But that's hard for me to wrap my brain around, because like even from a little kid, like my dad taught me chess like right when I could walk. And so I learned to strategize as a little kid, and I loved that part. So that's why I think I love 3D, because I can strategize enough to win it on the course.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if that was on purpose or just that we didn't have a whole lot else to do, But I just remember my dad. I used to play my dad in chess, and then one of my favorite Christmas presents was a chessboard that I could play against, and I could turn the difficulty level up, and I just kept playing against the game. And so I used to sit and do that all the time. And now I taught my Landon how to play chess, and we play chess a lot too. But I just think it's a great thing to teach kids anyway.
That's kind of funny. It's kind of parallels. Like, I never really had a TV growing up when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So we always read a ton.
Mm-hmm.
Kids, we always played games. My mother was just ultra competitive. I remember when one of my first experiences, my wife with my mother, we were bowling, and she turns over to me and she's like, "Now I know why you are the way you are." My mother's like 60 years old and pissed off because she's losing at bowling, And I used to play Scrabble with her, right?
Yeah.
And we still play when she comes over, and she ain't got nothing for me now. So, oh yeah, dude, I don't lose. I don't like to lose to Candyland. I feel like you're setting the precedence if you throw it, right.
100%.
You're giving that kid a bone, and you gotta make them learn that there's winners and losers. And if you want to be a winner, there's a road.
That's exactly right.
I don't know. I believe that. Sometimes I am a little hardcore on that, I think, but I mean, it's just like I moved down here to Utah because of the vibrant archery community. Incentive drives everything, and the incentive can simply be, now it's for me, and I'm assuming for you, it was just I distinctly remember Augusta, when you made a comment to me as well, if I don't win this one, I got to go back to Land Rock, and you won it and never look back. And I always wondered what I would do if I was put in that situation, and I'm kind of glad I've never had to. I kind of feel like I won a lot of tournaments because I have a job and I can let it all hang out. But I'm with you on the tournament formats. It takes a certain personality. I remember this year we were at Vegas, and I was watching it with somebody. I'm like, "Hey, there's the first Type A gone. They're all Type Bs now."
Yeah.
Type A guy will make it through sometimes.
Yeah.
But they do it on sheer bravado. Chris Perkins is one of them guys. I think you're one of those guys, and not to knock you, but I make this comment to people. I said, Levi will always struggle a little bit, I think, winning Vegas, because he's just one of them guys that gets nervous. And there's some of these guys, you look at him, you're like, how does he not get nervous? I get this question a lot. How important are my stabilizers? Well, stabilizers probably one of the most important things on my bow. Its job is to control the motion before, during, and after the shot. That helps us hold steady. It helps hold the bow still while the bow is loading and unloading from full draw to static. And it also controls the bow against our mistakes, so it makes it more forgiving. With Bee Stinger, you get a lightweight, high modulus bar with vibration dampening built into the bar. This is very critical in terms of getting the most out of your stabilization system. If you want to learn more, check out beestinger.com.
Well, first, I feel like mental and physical for me go hand in hand. I feel like without one, I don't really I'm not great at the other. But it can change big time difference between a tournament and a hunt. If I'm going on a sheep hunt, obviously my physical prep has to be like pristine, my gear check, all that stuff changes from me going on a whitetail hunt. I mean, if you look at the average whitetail hunter, it's not your, complete stud athlete look, but like I do a lot of adventure hunts. I love, the mountain stuff. But But, you know, mentally for me, tournaments is probably more important. And physical on the hunt is probably more important. Now, you go on a sheep hunt for 14 days, you better be pretty mentally in check or you're going to give up pretty quick, you know. And that, I remember when I first started those hunts, Dennis Campbell, who's passed away since then, but he ran the Grand Slam Club convention and he'd killed like 300 different species, you know, and he was just an unbelievable world hunter. But he told me, I was going on my first sheep hunt, and he said, put one foot in front of the other, because when you're out there, you're going to try to find every excuse to come home, you know. And I was like, whatever, you know, no way. But about day 8 of that first 14-day sheep hunt, I was like, he was right. You know, you start thinking about home, you start thinking about your kids, you start thinking about every reason why you shouldn't be there. And so you have to really have a gut check and with yourself and find another gear. So I think that actually taught me a lot about mental toughness. I was fortunate to do that pretty young, and it kind of carried over into tournaments where I've won a lot of tournaments. I feel like being down, getting kicked in the teeth, you know, people thinking you got no chance. Heck, the first tournament this year, Foley, I was in 14th place after the first day. Come back and end up winning the tournament. You know, it's just you have to learn how to dig in mentally and say, okay, I sucked yesterday. Let's do something amazing today, make up for that performance, and give ourselves a chance, you know. And I think mental prep for me anymore is just going off experience in the past. I've been doing this for 20 years now, almost professionally. I got 4 kids. They're all going different directions. Life is a little different than it looked when I was 20. So it's more of understanding how to win a tournament and understanding how to compete. I'm a competitor. I'm never going to go there and not care. I can't. I've tried to go and be like, you know what? I didn't prepare as much as I should have for this one. So let's just have fun. Not my personality. It's not fun at all. I want to go win. And when I show up and it's the first target, I'm already thinking, how am I win this tournament? You know?
Right.
And I probably won a lot of tournaments that I shouldn't have just because of that, I think. But
that's
rein all that in, like physical, mental. For me, I work out 5-6 days a week, because for me, maybe it's not, I don't have to do that to win an archery tournament, because you look at some of the guys that win archery tournaments, they ain't seen a gym and ever, you know. But when I'm standing out there on that final arrow, I feel like mentally, if I know I've done everything physically to deserve to be standing there, and then mentally I feel comfortable there, it just gives me that little extra edge to stand there and perform, because of how my brain works. Like we talked about before, I get nervous, and so I feel like I need to feel like I deserve to be standing there,
exactly,
on that last arrow.
Yeah, so. I think you're absolutely right there, because Lanny Basham, when I went to see Lanny Basham, he was kind of one of the premier mental coaches in most of the shooting sports, and he always said, you put yourself where you view yourself. Okay. And we all are big macho men, and we don't like to admit the fact that, you know, we may have a lower view of ourselves than we project. Some people project way more than they got, and it's pretty superficial, and you can see through it. But yeah, I've never been a gym guy. I hate it. I can't tell you how much I hate it. I mean, when I was in the Army, the worst thing in the world was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go run. I hated that crap. And I don't, I feel good after the fact. Like, I'll go to the gym with my wife, but, I haven't gone for a month because she's coming off surgery. She went to Argentina. I don't go. But I love the way I feel, but I do it for her, but it kind of gives me, man, I tell you what, yeah, it makes me feel like 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And I don't really do a lot. I'm other than just shoot my bow and kind of run around like the Energizer Bunny. I think that's how I keep the calories off.
Yeah, and you're naturally a fit guy. You're not one that your body is turning on itself. You know what I'm saying? It's because
it wants to. Trust me. There's so many times I would rather go in and just sit down and watch a movie with my wife, honestly. And I just feel like I got 5 bows to put together. That bow wasn't shooting good. I got to go yesterday morning. I got up 5 o'clock in the morning because Friday I got up at 6 and my 4-wheeler wouldn't start. And I went down to shoot some cuts in because I got meetings with Bushnell and I got meetings with this other guy, and we're trying to fix this cut thing, and nobody's going to do it if I don't do it. And it's just, and then I went to a 22 shoot this weekend, and of course I wasn't prepared for that. And I mean, I just get as irritated shooting that. I haven't shot one in 6 months, but I still try to win, like you said.
100%. Yeah.
And I know I can, but I'm able to check myself on that and say, look, you didn't put anything into these guys. They're winning this, or they put it in there. You know, they put the work in. But one of the great things that people that I kind of disagree with, people say, well, if you get to a tournament and you don't have it already, you're not going to find it. Bull crap.
No, I've found it the last second so many times.
This year's been just a nightmare for me. I was like, I can't make the damn leaderboard until the final 10 targets.
Yeah.
And
I agree with that. I'm always looking for it, dude. I mean, I'll leave the house so many times, tell Samantha, I got no chance. Don't even watch the scores. I got no chance. I'm shooting terrible. Get there, practice terrible, wake up Friday morning, go to the bags, can't miss. And I'm like, no idea.
Yeah.
You know, or even be 6 down after the first 5 targets. And then all of a sudden you just keep searching, keep finding, keep looking. And then all of a sudden you hit 6 12s in a row and you're back in the game.
You know what's funny about that is so many people I talk to about on the phone periodically throughout the year, they're like, we're talking about something they don't like about their setup, or they don't like about this, and it's 2 weeks for the tournament. It's like, I'm not going to change before the tournament. I'm like, what? You got 2 weeks, dude.
Oh yeah.
I have rebuilt. This is not an exaggeration. I have rebuilt my bow at every single tournament this year but one, because I'm in a new bow year, and we all know how tough that can be. I mean, it's so hard to keep up with 4 bows and setups. And, you know, I was at this last IBO, and I'm just like, something ain't right. Something is not right. And I was able to win the tournament with it not being right. I moved the knock point up. I figured, well, maybe that's it. And that did help a little bit. It's sagging low. And these types of things you just learn over the years. And it's just so hard to articulate to people that it took me 20 years to win my first pro tournament. You don't have to nowadays, because there's so much information out there that you don't have to make all the mistakes that we had to make, you know, coming up to the food chain. And one of my favorite statements now is, it's going to be a tough road from 35 to 50 for guys now, because you got all these young guys coming. You can see that in the no pro class. I mean, you got all these young guys coming with all this information. They're in the prime of their life.
Now, all the time. They have time.
I talked to Charlie Rogers. You know Charlie, right? Charlie's ex-pitcher for the Braves, wasn't he?
I think so,
yeah. And he runs like a baseball camp. And I asked him, I shoot when he shoots with us in the senior pro, and I said, so what do you think? What's the prime of a young man's life? I mean, where is he at his physical top level? And he said 18 to 27. Yeah, that's pretty much what's winning the known pro class.
Yeah, I think I learned how to win at a young age. And I think that was important, because I watch a lot of these guys that have the talent to win and practice with them. But when it comes down to, they get to a certain point, they just hit the brakes. And I just think they have to break through that mental barrier and let themselves win, right? I think, I learned how to win when I was a kid in the amateur ranks coming up, and I loved to win. I learned how to win not only barely, I learned how to get a lead and make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and be okay with that, because that's not an uncomfortable thing to do. It's to take a lead, not try to protect it.
Right.
And that's what most people struggle with mentally, is when they get the lead, they instantly go into safe mode and try to preserve it. And when I was younger, I learned how to take that lead and go, I don't want to win by 2 points. I want to win by 30, and just keep driving. And because what I learned to do, my dad was my coach and taught me to do, was not shoot against everybody else, shoot the course, shoot the highest score you can shoot on that course. Because it's very easy to limit yourself when you if your competition is struggling that day and you want to just keep a 4-point lead, then you're going to struggle too, but shoot the course. And it's allowed me to win some tournaments by big amounts. But I think just keeping that mentality has allowed me to win tournaments without being as prepared as I used to be. I complained yesterday to Samantha. I said, I'm so unprepared. I'm going. I was in Kentucky for 4 days coaching my son's baseball tournaments this past weekend. And I get home and I go out here and spend all day getting a sight tape yesterday on this bow and get it perfect and come back inside and go, holy crap, I set that bow up for the IBO last week or 2 weeks ago when my son was born. And I think it's shooting too fast. I shoot the chronograph shooting 300 foot a second. I had to start all over. I was like, I am just so scattered. But it's like, she goes, you remember Jamie Jameson? Jamie Jameson. You remember him, right, Tim?
Oh, yeah.
She told a story to me yesterday. She said, me and Jamie Jameson were shooting. This was Samantha talking at the bags in Metropolis, Illinois, way back. And he was struggling on the bags. And he said, I can't wait for Levi to have kids and be pulled in 100 different directions so he can know what this feels like, because back then I was 24 and I was just winning and just had no responsibility really. And just all my time was dedicated to the game. And man, those feelings I haven't felt in a long time where you just show up and I'm going to shoot 40 up and I'm going to pound this weekend.
Yep.
I show up and I'm like, I could shoot 20 up today or I could shoot 2 down. I don't know what I'm going to do, So,
what's funny is if you look at the guys in 3D that win, is exactly what you said. You go out to try to 12 every single target on the course. You are giving yourself a chance to 12 every single one. I don't lay up ever. I may protect my 12 a little bit, but I never lay up. And it cracks me up to watch guys that will aim center 10 hoping to luck into it. And it's like, how do you expect to win with that mentality? You can't do it. And I've always, I've never had that, like you said, that responsibility. I have a lot of responsibility with work, there's so many times I want to go back to the hotel room. I don't. I got to go to work the booth and I'm out there till dark a lot. And I enjoy that interaction with people. I do. But the one thing I've learned about in 3D that I need more than any, especially if I'm judging yardage, and this is just stuff you learn over the years. And you and I've had this conversation because judging yardage is not what the outsider think it is. Okay.
Right.
So I tell people, these guys, you know what my position's on unknown yardage is. It's just, I'm good at it. Sure. But I have 140 targets in my backyard. Mm-hmm. Okay. My problem with it is it's a barrier to entry into our sport, and it's just too difficult for people to navigate and too expensive. And it's just simple recall memory. And the one thing that I've learned the most is what I put in my body and how much sleep I get has a massive effect on how I'm going to judge yardage. Mm-hmm. Sleep being the number one thing. And it is super difficult when you're out at a tournament. You get 8 to 10 hours of really good REM sleep, and if you can get that really deep sleep where you wake up feeling refreshed, I'll tell you what, it's a game changer for me. Now, when you jump into, like you said, the par side of archery, it's so much more difficult because it's just like they issue you these points and then you're just trying not to give them back all weekend. Mm-hmm. It's not the same dynamic game. I remember when I won my first tournament in Myrtle Beach, and I heard people like, they didn't know who I was. They didn't know me at all, a lot of them. And they're like, I was just a fluke. And I'm like, you have no idea the mountain I just climbed, Mm-hmm. And it was super emotional to me. And it was like, I got there. I made it. I got over the top, like you were saying. And, I knew I was going to win after that. I just absolutely knew it because I won everything at a local regional level, and I just couldn't get out of my own head. And I still, to this day, that's my number one. It's most people's problem. Let's just face it.
Yeah. Whether most won't admit it. That's the difference.
Yeah. 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 I know I can blame my bow and this and that. You know what's funny about this bow last week? I called Todd up at Bowtech. I'm like, man, I don't know what's wrong with this bow. I just can't seem to get it. I said, can you send me another riser? I had a Hoyt one time that the riser just had a weak spot. Just a weird thing, And only time I've ever seen it in my career. And I thought, maybe that's what's happened with this. So I get this bow stripped all the freaking way down. And I went to take my rest off, and I realized the dampener on my flex guard was hitting the top of my rest. Well, that's probably where all those little flyers were coming from.
Oh, yeah. It's a frustrating game.
It is amazing after 40 years of doing this at the level that I've done it, that it's always something stupid. And I preach this and preach this and preach this. You have to have a process. And I remember this guy that sets up a booth at IBO, and he's bragging up this or that. And I said, making some claim about his arrows being accurate. And I said, did you shoot them all in? So I grabbed his arrows and I looked at him, and he doesn't have the spine marks. I'm like, he was telling a guy that he does everything I tell him to. I grabbed his arrows and I looked at him. I said, I don't see no damn spine marks on these arrows. So he started backtracking. But, I have a process, because that process, kind of tries to help eliminate those problems. Because if you can have your equipment right, you can have your physical preparation right, and the mental side of it is just going to be that much better. Like you said, if I go out here, and I used to, when I was younger, I'd go out here and there were times that I could shoot 220 target rounds a day, and I keep track of the score. And I do this for 5 or 6 days before a tournament, and I know where I'm at, right? And that gives a sense. I've walked out and said, honey, I'm winning this one. And I know it. Now, I haven't shot 4 practice rounds all year, and I've won two IBOs. Now,
right.
I'm not shooting in the open pro class. It's a little bit different. But I've shot pretty good. I would have made your guys shoot off at the last IBO, which is crazy because I just couldn't get it going. And I knew that that course is always tough. They set a really good, course up there at Franklin. And the one thing that I was always distinctly aware of is the 2 guys that were leading our class had never really been there before. And you and I know, well, as just like you just said, it's hard to hold on a lead. I don't really, a lot of times, like to be leading the first day, because unless I got a really good buffer. But I'm like you. I go out and step on the gas, and because it's hard to win, and that's what happened. We got to target 30, and Harold, I was like, damn it, I need to get some 11s. I cannot hit an 11. It's like I'm usually one of the high 11 counts, the high 8 counts, right?
Yeah.
And he said, I still remember this. He said, well, no, I just need you to keep shooting 10s. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, Harold, I'll shoot 10s as long as you shoot some 8s. He must have took it to heart. I don't know, because he was shooting as good as I've ever seen him shoot a bow. It was just like, dang, I don't know if I can beat this guy this weekend. He is on it. And I was judging well. I just wasn't shooting good because I knew it was something in the bow, but I just couldn't quite figure it out, And well, he shot like 4 8s, and I shot 6 up on the back half, and boom, I was 2 points ahead going. 2 points ahead going into the shoot off, and I was just. I kind of lucked out and hit a 12 on my first shot in the shoot off, but the second shot in the shoot off was that new Ram. It's got a 12 like that big, or 11 that big, and I said, okay, if you can inside out that one, it's over. And I had a bad glare, and I was just let down, and I said, you got to give this a better effort. So many times you throw up on a 3D target. I make this statement to a lot of guys is never pull the trigger unless you know exactly where you're at. Okay. So I think guys do that a lot in 3Ds. They get up, they get lost, and they just said, well, you just lowered your chances of hitting an 11 by probably 80%.
Yeah. That cost me the last ASA.
Yeah. You never take, it's taking chances, and, when I used to go to like the European Pro Series, I just knew these guys didn't have a chance because I outworked them. I went down to West Mountain and shot 40 freaking hours worth of sight tape worth of cuts in. And when I walked up to a target, I knew they were guessing with a rangefinder or a cut chart. And I knew that I knew how to set my sight. There wasn't even a question. Same thing with OPA. That's why I think I did so well at it. And I knew I was going to, because I knew those guys weren't going to put the effort in. And,
right.
But like Vegas, good Lord, you just can't outwork your competitors. It's just like you have to, I would be better off to just get a shrink.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. And I guess at this point in my career, it's just who I am, and I don't have to to try to kick myself into another gear. I think I've just learned to. So many times I think I've thought I was out of a tournament and then ended up coming back and winning it. So now I understand that bad things happen out there and you're going to struggle and you're going to make mistakes. But the difference is that what I've realized is so does everybody around you. And a lot of times you isolate yourself and think you're the only one that's nervous and you're the only one that's struggling and you're the only one that just shot an 8 and you're the only one that can't seem to judge a target right or make it. But like 9 times out of 10, everybody you're going head to head with are feeling those same things. And that's one of the things I had to really come to grips with. And I remember the first time I realized that I used to go to indoor shoots and think I'm the only one that's shaking right now. And I remember that when I won indoor nationals, and I hadn't won many indoor stuff, but when I won indoor nationals, I went up, I think the 5 of us that were in that shoot-off was Rhea Wild, Chance Bobeff, Jesse Broadwater, and Grant Schleusner, and me, and maybe one other. So it was a stacked. Like those back in that time, that was anybody and everybody at an indoor shoot. Like you might as well have had nobody else because it was like Jesse, like he was talking about, was unbeatable almost at certain times, just unbelievable. And so I'm standing there and I'm like, there's no way I can win this. I'm nervous. I'm a nervous wreck. All these guys have won this tournament before except me, and right before we drew back for score, and I think I won that tournament with pro hunters too. I shot them from start to finish that tournament. But I heard something rattling and I looked up and Rio Wild was standing in front of me who'd been there 100 times in those tournaments and his arrows were shaking together, hitting each other. And I was like, holy crap, he's nervous too, And so it just calmed me down and I realized everybody's nervous. Everybody's struggling out here. So going back to what I was saying, back at this last ASA, I pulled back and it was an easy target. I was shooting great. I had took the lead from Danny the second day. Everything was going. I was 12 and stuff. Numbers were coming easy. And I pulled back on like a 38-yard deer. And in Kentucky, the glare and the shadows are terrible. And it's the hardest on that power line to see what you're trying to hit. It's just the hardest that we face in a year. And it was a deer that I knew the yardage. It was 38 yards. I think I had 7.5 on it. 12able number if I make a great shot. But the shadows were doing this on the target with the sun.
Oh, that's the worst.
And my fiber kind of faded out in there. And I'm just like in this calm state in my mind. And sometimes you can get too calm. And I'm just watching it. And I'm just waiting on it. And then I realized my bubble's out of level. Like I should probably level that. And so as I level my bubble, I see my pin under the core line and it fires. Boom, on one of the easiest targets of the day. And I shoot a 5. And with a 12able number, that's a 7-point swing that I just gave Danny. And you don't make those mistakes, right? So, and I mean, it was one of those deals where it's like once in 10 years mistakes at that level, if you're going to win a tournament. And I mean, I remember just being so down on myself and just trying to snap out of it. We go to the net, like one of the next targets is a 50-yard black cat in a hole off over a hill. And I remember never even thinking about the lower 12, never even thought about it. Walking up, smashing the upper 12, just never moved, pin super focused, dead centered it, never called it. So I just gave up 9 points at 2 targets because of mental mistakes, Yeah. And so I just had to let the guys walk off from that target. And I went behind a tree and just had a conversation with myself. I said, you can either, keep being an idiot, keep bleeding points back, or we can get it together and try to give ourselves a chance, And I ended up not winning the tournament, but I got myself together, regrouped, shot great to end the day. But, you mental mistakes like that happen. But what I try to teach my son too in baseball is don't let one mistake turn into 2. And, I think that happens to people a lot. They make one mistake, let it turn into 2, and let it turn into an entire day of it. Where you really just got to go, okay, the game is not going to wait for me to pout and feel sorry for myself. I have to regroup and start fresh. Let's go, and like forget about it. So I think that's one of the things that would really help people is just being able to move on from mistakes. And it's easier said than done, because
one of the big things about mental training is that you learn is you have to learn to, how to recognize what's happening to your body. When you get nervous, I used to get really, really bad nervous and feet around. So I go home and just dwell on it and try to do some things. And I just go back to the next one, just kind of praying that it wasn't going to get, it's going to get better. And it would just get worse and worse. I mean, I get to the point where I'm like, there's nobody in their right mind can shoot a bow shaking like this. There's no way. I mean, I watch these other guys. I'm like, why does this happen to me? And I used to be that way a lot, about why is all this happening to me? Why me? And then I finally just started letting stuff roll off, And I read this book called Panic Away, and it was extremely good because and stuff that Lanny put out and everything. It's all just kind of this accumulation of information, and you learn how to deal with this stuff. And the thing about this Panic Away thing is it taught you to use all five senses and to label. And, you want to label what's going on. You want to give it a name. You want to let it run its course and just tell yourself that, look, you've done your thing. I'm going to do my thing. Okay. You got to learn to shoot through that. And I started doing that. My last tournament as a pro was Arizona Cup. And Mike Slosser was there, and he was just, it's windier than heck. And he's just like, clunk. He shoots a real heavy bow. And I'm thinking, well, I get this thing. I'm tall. I get blown around too much. And, blah, 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 blah. But at some point, you got to start saying, okay, what I got to do to win this match? What I got to do to win this match? And I am literally just shaking through this, but I'm realizing that the number one thing that I'm focusing on now is not the nerves. It's what do I have to do when I'm nervous? And the number one thing I've learned is not to collapse. First thing your body does when you start shaking, your mind, you want to get rid of that feeling. That's the very first thing. The body doesn't like it. The mind doesn't like it. It wants to get rid of it. So your number one thing to do, you speed up, right? So you got to think, slow down. You have to learn how to function through that. And I just shook through that stuff. And it wasn't what I consider like 100% performance. I actually went to see a hypnotherapist one year. I was like, why? I have this problem. I said, I can never shoot to my ability until I'm behind.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all of my best performances in archery have come when I'm trailing. Okay. And it's good that the other competitors know that I'm coming.
Yeah.
It does. I mean, but it's just, it eats me up inside to know that, how do I harness that? How does a baseball pitcher or a golfers are the ones that blow me away, is how do they stand there in front of all those people with a golf club that doesn't have a sight on it? Like, I've shot barebow too, right? You don't have a sight, right? So when you have a negative thought, it's really bad. I can imagine golf being exactly the same way. You and I have golf together. You're pretty good and I suck, and I'm just like, Levi comes out, we play golf, and he borrows a set of my clubs. He duffs the first four and shoots par. And I'm like, is he good at everything? I'm like, it's ridiculous. It's like, I can try my guts out at golf and I suck. But I guess if I blame the fact that I'm 6'6", but
golf was my getaway from archery before I had kids. It's like I would go to the range and chip and drive for hours and I love the game. I still do. I take my clubs to every tournament because it's still my way to mentally release from archery. It's that one time when I'm at a tournament, I can go golf and I'm not thinking about the tournament. So me and Justin Hanna and Jacob Marlowe and a couple of us, sometimes Darren Christian, we'll go golf and just kind of not think about the tournament for a couple hours. But
so one of the things that I teach is, and competitive archery has taught me how to deal with that pressure situation hunting. Okay. And I remember a couple of years ago in Nebraska, I threw down on this deer, and it wasn't even a really big deer, but it was a long shot. And I started shaking, and I'm thinking, what do you do? What is that? I mean, it's like not even a deer that I value, but my first and instant thought, and I did this on a bull elk that charged in one time, same feeling, but this thing just came charging in, and it was just like I just started shaking, and all I thought was pull hard, pull hard, pull hard. My mind got away from thinking of what was happening, and all it was done on, it was working on is the process it takes to make sure that I'm going to make the shot. Okay. And but without that knowledge, without that tournament background, learning how to deal with that stuff, I don't think a lot of hunters know how to deal with it. And visualization is the best tool. If you believe it in here, you have a much better chance of getting it and seeing an achievement. So if you're in that situation, you get that fear and flight nervous reaction, the very first thing you need to do is slow down. The second thing you do is visualize what's going to happen. So many guys, you hear the story over and over again. They just threw the pins up. They don't know which pin was where and they missed and they don't know why. Well, because their body's trying to dump that feeling, right? Mm-hmm. So if they'd have just slow down, that pin's going to go right there. I'm going to visualize what David Tubbs, I quote David Tubbs a lot because I've read a lot of his stuff and I really like it. He says, visualize the acceptable sight picture, okay? Not the perfect sight picture, the acceptable sight picture. If it's blowing butthole sideways and you're shaking, you're not going to be perfectly still. So what are you visualizing that perfectly still, shot? So you visualize the acceptable sight picture, and then you never let those different aspects of the mental game mix with each other. Once you've got through that, then you go into the execution follow through. And if you segment it up that way, then you stop dwelling on one thing and you move in, through that cycle. And I would encourage people to read David Tubbs' High Power Rifle. There's a lot of good stuff in there and a lot of direct correlation to archery. And I think a lot of times you can pick a lot of this stuff up, from different sports that kind of correlate, like golf, because archery is a static sport, right? We start from a static position. There's lots of things that can mess with your head, especially indoors. That's very similar to a golfer standing over a 6-foot putt. Moving sports are different. Okay. I don't think they have the same mental problems because as you move, your subconscious takes over and you can kind of get rid of some of that stuff. So, and you go into just natural, but you watch guys that are really good in basketball dynamically, and then they stop and have to shoot a free throw and it looks like they threw a brick up there,
Yeah. It's because I feel like, because I played all the sports growing up and when you're reacting, adrenaline, like when you have adrenaline rushes and those urges of energy, it's a great thing when you're trying to tackle a quarterback or where you're running the ball or where you're trying to jump out of the gym and dunk, it's when you're reacting, it's a totally different ball game than when you're standing there alone, still trying to do something with precision. Right. And so I think it all comes down to when they talk about skiers, if they're thinking, don't hit the tree, don't hit the tree, don't hit the tree, wow, they hit the tree, right?
Exactly, yeah.
You're thinking about where you want to go and you're visualizing the path, not what you don't want to happen. Because as soon as I start shooting and going, don't shoot, the wind's doing this and I don't want to hit over there, well, I'm going to hit over there. I have to visualize exactly how I want that shot to go and where I want to hit. And that's what I'm trying to accomplish. But to your point, if every bow hunter and bow hunters they could benefit so much from going to competitions where they were held accountable for how well they shoot and they knew their score was going to be posted in front of God and everybody. And because that same feeling in a tournament correlates, how you deal with those nerves in a tournament correlates perfectly to the woods and how you deal with those nerves in the woods. It's not the same feeling necessarily, but how you deal with it is exactly the same.
It's funny, love him or hate him. Remember when Chris Brackett started shooting 3D and he was going to whip your butt?
I do. Well,
but but if you really looked at him, he got better as the year got through.
He was one of the ones that he wasn't scared to come do it. He was almost too confident. Like he called me and he said, "This is what I'm going to do." He said, I'm gonna do a documentary on 3 years to the top, and I'm gonna beat you in 3 years. And I was like, I said, man, I didn't tell him he wouldn't, but I said, I think you're underestimating how good these guys are. There's the 1,500 people, even the amateurs that show up at these tournaments are the best. Like, they're good. Like, I'd put them up against any professional hunter in the world, and they're going to beat them because these guys dedicate time to being precise with their equipment. I mean, I think when he started the year, he was dead last the first two tournaments, but by the end, he stuck with it. He was middle of the pack somewhere.
Yeah, I gave David Hauser crap. He got beat by Chris Brackett.
Hey, but you know what? The same point goes. Remember Joby Shaw?
Oh, dude.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite memories. I told this at the last ASA. We were in an IBO for the Triple Crown. I think you were in our group. Maybe. No, that was a different time. But this time, I remember I had Joey by like 3 or 4 points, and there was like 5 targets left. And I was shooting well, but it was a javelina, like a bomb straight up a hill. And I let it off and shot a 5 right in the leg, like just missed it, And I haven't even come out of my scope hardly. When it hits, Joby goes, because he couldn't stop his mouth. He just said, I was praying you would do something like that. And I was just like, you literally just said that, and 2 targets later, he shoots a 5 on a little easy bear down the hill. And I was like, well, there you go, bud. I should have been like, I was
just praying you do that.
Like that. But I'll never forget him saying that.
IBO used to be a speed game, right? So there's always the temptation to maximize the speed and give up accuracy, because it's a yardage judging contest, right? But then it's not, and Levi, he probably admitted he gave up a few tournaments trying to shoot that bow, and he would pick that old slow apex up and he would wear us out because he would never miss. But it's always that's the beauty of, I guess, the 3D game is you're always playing this game, of, do I give up a little accuracy for speed, or do I give up diameter in a shaft?
Right.
Point weight. You play this game, and I love that because it really, I like the known side of it a lot too, because you really are trying to target 100% accuracy and forgiveness. Okay. And you don't have to take any considerations into the arrow build. In IBO, I'm looking at, I need to maximize my diameter, but I still got to have a really accurate setup. Okay. We're only allowed 306-7 foot a second right now. And, you got to pull 70 pounds to get a fat arrow up to speed. But then you look over the course of the year, how much is that big arrow going to pick up for you? Then you get guys like Levi who just go out and shoot pro hunters just because they can whip our butt with them. And I remember one year he shot pro hunters the whole year. And I think it was because he was just so much on a different level of everybody else that it was almost a badge of honor. It was like a personal challenge to himself to see if he could do it.
It wasn't how it started. That was my backup bow I had set up for Reading. If you remember, we were in Fort Benning, and I had to go get my backup bow, and I ended up winning that. Then I won Reading. I think it was the same year I won Indoor Nationals, all with pro hunters. It was just one of those years. I mean, that was in my prime before kids when,
I still think your Reading performance, your first Reading win, first time he ever went, he shoots a 10,000s pin. He doesn't even shoot a scope lens. And he beat everybody. And I was like, the level of focus that it takes to do that is just insane. To be able to shoot a pin on those orange dots, and everybody was saying you were knocking the center out of them, so that was just super impressive. I'm the opposite way. Of course, I'm a puncher, so I like to blow that target up and get it up here, and I don't care about the movement as much. My mind has to know where the pin is. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's just crazy to have seen that. And actually pro hunters won that Reading back-to-back, you and Chance. So we always joke about it. If you could only have one arrow, what would it be?
Yeah.
You would choose a pro hunter because it just does it all. It's just such a good arrow.
It's a great shaft. Yeah. That, back then there was about a 3-year stretch where I shot no lens, an up pin, that old Apex.
Yeah.
and I was just in a different zone. I've never been able to get back in. I've had great years and never really fell off, but I've never been able to achieve that level of just concentration and comfort with the sight picture, and my eyes changed shortly after that, where I would see double pins.
Right.
It wasn't that I couldn't see detail, but I would see two.
Yeah.
And so then I had to start using a lens and a bigger, playing with apertures and the whole thing. And they've steadily just changed. I still have good vision, but man, that 22 to 25, it was like, good grief.
You know what? Dave Stepp came back out to shoot as a senior pro, and I was thinking, he's going to wear it out. And he didn't. And I talked to Dave a little bit, and he basically said when he was young, he could park in the middle. His pin wouldn't move. And I'm like, that has never happened to me. Yeah. Never. But I also think it's one of the reasons why I have lasted so long in the sport is that I've learned that I can deal with that motion, that I've learned a process that deals with motion. And I think the best, oldest guys are always going to be punchers. Or, guys that can command the shot because they have dealt with movement their whole life.
Right. And I haven't for sure. Like during those 3 years, my pin wouldn't move. Like it would, at 50 yards, I could put it on that little black dot and never see the black dot. Boom.
Trust me. I know. I watched him shoot this group one time at Florida. And I was just like, he took 7 pro hunters and stuck them in a dot that big. And they were all like wedged in from the outside. I'm like, and he's shooting a surprise shot. And I'm like, how can anybody hold a pin that good?
Yeah.
Because I know what
movement. The older I get, the more movement.
Yeah.
I still have days. Like yesterday, I went out and shot, and it was parking. But I'd say that happens like once a week now.
Okay, so, I got a question for you then. How much do you think, and you and I have had this conversation, how much do you think that is because of your physical training? Because you're very strong, you're very fit. You've said to me in the past that definitely helps your hold.
Yeah, in one way it does, and in one way it doesn't. I think, because you never see any really jacked guys, and I'm not really jacked, right? But I'm saying you never see the big muscle guys do well in archery at all. Yeah. There's too much muscle influence on that, on your shot. And I feel like there's a happy medium there because you look like guys that hold the best. Your Chances, your Jesse Broadwaters.
Yeah, they're like rails.
Muscle tone, right? Chance is really skinny. So I think really muscle can have a really negative impact on how you aim because I feel like it changes so much from day to day. Like your flexibility changes, your stiffness, when you get nervous, that muscle's trembling, right? And so it needs more oxygen. So like, I think there's a happy medium there of like being fit and strong. But like, I'll tell you what I found out the other day is I always would try not to work out on the weeks of a tournament. Like Wednesday was my cutoff, right? I try to rest. But the other day I did a back workout and that afternoon in the morning and then like really just exhausted my back. And that afternoon I was like, I should go shoot. And then I was like, I better not because it's probably going to be terrible. But I did it anyway. And, dude, I couldn't miss. My pin was parked. But I think I had exhausted the muscles that were negatively influencing my shot. So it was just very static. And, like, I feel like sometimes when you have a lot of muscle, like they're looking for things to do, right? Like your muscles looking for something to trigger on. They're very antsy. I don't know I know mentally being physically fit gives me an edge.
Right.
Mentally. Yeah. I just feel it, right?
It's always what I wonder. I go to the gym, I get sore as crap. I'm like, I can't shoot like this. Right. And then you get about a week and a half in, all of a sudden you can work out and not be sore as much, but I still feel like it's like, I don't know. There's no love of it. There's no love of it for me. That's the hard part. It's just like, you hear all these guys on Instagram, you got to be disciplined. You got to, I mean, I'm like the old Chinese guy said, you want to live longer? Take a nap.
I really think that fitness, probably and working out probably has something to do with how inconsistent from day to day I aim.
Okay.
Because maybe one muscle group's exhausted and this other muscle group's taking over today.
All
But
right.
because back then, whenever I aimed so great, I didn't go to the gym. I was not the most fit person in the world. And so I look at the competitors and some of the guys that shoot well, like really incredibly pure shots, and they don't have muscle, you know. And so I don't know, but I wouldn't trade it. I love the way it makes me feel. And
Sure.
for hunting, um,
Oh,
it's
massive difference.
yeah, you go to pick up 100-pound pack with a bunch of elk, hind quarter strapped to
Yeah,
it. Like,
I worked out for like a circuit training thing with my wife at the gym last year before we went elk hunting or caribou hunting in Alaska. And I mean, it was crazy how fast I could go. And I mean, just and you recover fast. And
oh
when
yeah,
you recover fast in a tournament setting, when you have really good cardio in tournaments, see Terry Ragsdale, who's a blast from the past, was a hell of a shooter, but very tight B. But also he would run every morning before he actually competed. And I think I would be curious to understand his process, either just like running, or I've read places where that exercise dumps a lot of the adrenaline out of your system, and maybe that's what he was trying to achieve. Um, but there's also a book I've been reading called The Silva Mind Technique, and they talk about the alpha, theta, beta side of the brain in there, and I think about the one major indoor tournament that I won, which was Lancaster, and the way I was feeling and thinking. And people always say, well, yeah, you remember that one time where you got that funnel vision and you didn't have to think about it. Well, that was that day. Then I have to think about what led up to that. Okay. Well, I was seated 28th. I really didn't feel like I had a chance. So I went out and played poker all night with a bunch of guys. I literally had an hour of sleep. Went to the gas station, the Wawa, got me a coffee and a donut, and I went to the tournament, right? And I think that I was in such a drone that I was type B for a while, because all of a sudden, none of the scatterbrain crap's going on. It's just, I'm just executing, right? And I think that's the big, massive difference. And I think that I'm actually going to get into this book a little bit more, because there may be a process in there. I'm sure there is. I mean, if these Shaolin monks can do what they do, there's got to be a way to train it out of people. It's just a matter of, I always say incentive drives everything. Okay.
yeah.
You got to want it bad enough. There's got to be a big enough carrot dangling in order for you to actually put that effort into it. So
I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's the one I remember the most. I definitely won't be Tim's favorite, but we were in Reading one year and Mike Pollard was there. You probably remember this, Tim, but Mike Pollard is a jokester. Like, you never know what's going to happen. But Tim was leading. I think it was maybe after 2 days of the tournament, and Tim was leading the tournament.
That was my Cyclops thing.
Yeah, yeah. And this is when he had his go-go gadget glasses and stuff going on. But I remember Mike goes, "I can fix this. You want Tim out of the tournament? I'll fix it." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Watch." So me and I think Darren Christianberry and Chance, we're standing there, and Mike walks up to Tim. He's on the practice range before we go out that morning. And Tim shoots one, and Mike goes, "Dude, your arrows are flying terrible." And Tim goes, "I thought I was seeing that too." And his arrows were flying like darts. They were just going through the sun, and it looked like they were flying bad, but it wasn't. It was just hitting different shades of the sun. And Mike goes, "Dude, something's going on. Your arrows are cutting flips. They're doing all kinds." It wasn't 10 minutes. We look over. Tim's got his rest off his bow, and he's doing something with his rest. And I'm just like over there, like, oh my God, Tim's leading the tournament. And you wouldn't have had any effect on Tim that day, what Mike said, but Tim ended up not winning the tournament. But I just remember thinking, this guy, if he thinks his stuff isn't perfect, it doesn't matter what happened yesterday or the day before. He's tearing it apart, And so, and I think it's won tournaments for Tim over the years. I definitely think it's probably lost some too. I think it's just the way your brain works. If you don't have confidence in it, you're not shooting it.
Yeah, I've won way more than I've lost to that scenario because I coined the phrase, those who try nothing learn nothing. Okay.
Right.
And the worst phone call I get is from some 56-year-old guy who wants your problem fixed, but when you give him a solution, he's like, I've been doing it. You bring up the fact that he might be gripping his bow wrong or something, and he'd be like, I've been doing this for 35 freaking years. And it's like, I know a lot of people have been shooting archery their whole life and they suck.
Doing it wrong for 35 years.
Yeah. So, it's just, somebody told me, Dave Cousins was talking to them about the fact that people don't understand that with the travel schedule, you're not always ready when you get to a tournament, right? But 100%. The skill set that I've created over the years makes it easy to me. I'm not afraid of it. Okay. Mm-hmm. I can strip a bow down, refletch on my arrows, get the sight tape back on. We have things like Archer's Advantage sight tapes. It's simple. It doesn't take no time at all to get it back on. I've learned how to bare shaft tune a bow and how to make my bare shaft mimic what I'm seeing through paper. Okay. I know so much sometimes that it scares me to make a change because I know how everything affects it. It's a statement that ignorance is bliss. It's true. It's absolutely true.
100%. You used to tell me that.
Mm-hmm. It just takes so much work. Now, when I look at these 3 or 4 or 5-year-old bows and the tournament's coming up, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I just want to freeze up and do nothing sometimes. And I don't have that love or that even physical ability to just grind it for 15 hours like I used to. I stay out here till 3 o'clock in the morning, pop the lights out, shooting stuff in, doing this, changing that. I've been shooting my hunting bow because I got some big tags this year, and I want to get this cut data right for this guy, and I really want to get my hunting bow. I've never put this much work into a hunting bow, right? And that thing will kick your butt, 73 pounds, on that performance mode. And I've kind of like let my other bows go to the side. And so then I get into ready 2 or 3 days. I got 2 days left before I leave for Metropolis. I have not shot my ASA bow since the last Metropolis. Okay. But physically, I know how to shoot a bow, right?
Right.
I shoot some sort of a bow at least 5 days a week.
Right.
And so I try not to overanalyze that part of it. But the problem where I run into is I make changes in my release length, my draw length, all those tiny little things that make good great. Mm-hmm. And those are the things that I think I end up having to chase my tail at. Usually one of the things I love about shooting for Bowtech, I used to hate about Hoyt, is the fact that every year you have to freaking do a new bow, right? They come out with a new freaking bow every year and you've got to go shoot that thing. The beauty of Bowtech is, man, I gotta probably gonna have the same bow for at least 3 years. And year 2 and 3, it's gonna get ugly. And I'm actually doing pretty good in year 1. So it just learning all those little stabilization things that it's just, what it's like.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, you have to you start questioning, is it the birthday or is it the new bow? What is the new norm, right? What is the new, like David Tubbs says, what is the acceptable sight picture?
Right.
And I think a lot of people, they're not curious enough. They don't look enough, or honestly, they don't know where to look, and I'm seriously considering myself, and I've been saying this for years, because when I say stuff like that and tell people about it, it kind of forces my hand in it a little bit, but it's a time management thing. I want to start a YouTube channel called I Can Archery. I grew up with a mother that told me every time I said can't, she'd tell me can't died in the Army, And so has always resonated with me that, most people just don't believe in themselves enough, or they don't have the information in a concerted fashion where they have something to go back to. And that's one of the reasons we do these Aero University videos. And I like the videos. When I get tired of telling people enough, I'll make a video and then I can send them to the video. I can't talk to 40,000 people, but they can watch the dang video. And that's when I think you're seeing a lot of these young kids. They have all this information. They got to sort it out a little bit, but they don't have to make those same mistakes.
Yeah.
Kyle told me.
I think it's, people have a just fine, good enough mentality. And I think it drives me insane, that people are scared of precision. It's like they're scared of testing their limits, right? They're like, oh, it's good enough, just good enough. And I'm like, I have no idea how to be that way, and I'm glad, because they'll never find out how good they could be at something, or archery specifically, for sure. I mean, I did a rangefinder post yesterday talking about how important precision readings are in a rangefinder. And people are like, well, I've got this one I've had for years. It works just fine.
Oh, no,
I'm like, just fine. I'm like, yeah, if just fine is what you're shooting for, I have a bow that's dialed and I'm feeling great with it. I'm not tinkering at all, and I think that's where I never tinkered with anything. I build bows at the beginning of the year and it would last, and, I'd shoot it all year, never even think about it, and I just think back then I was a different person, a different shooter. I tinker more now than I ever have, and I tinker more every year than I ever have. And I think the more you learn, the more you know, and just the older I get, I'm not as good as I used to be. I'm still great. I'm still competitive, but I'm not as good as I used to be. I think I have to tinker a little more now. It's more important for me to have the worse you are as an archer. I think it's more important for you to know more about your equipment and to be able to build a system that is best for you, and understand what's happening in your sight picture, understand what's happening in your execution. And so now I've shot a bow my whole life. I'm out there. I know what I'm struggling with, right? And I'm like, I got to make a change here. If it's my release, I got to make a change. If it's my sight picture, I can't see. Something's blurry. It's causing me to over aim. I got to make a change in my sight picture. So yesterday, I'm moving my sight in and out. I'm changing stabilizer weights. I'm trying to get, where I'm comfortable looking through my scope, where I can clear up my picture, clear up my pin, where I'm torque tuning. I'm doing all these things yesterday with a setup where 15 years ago, I would have just been like, the pin never moves out of the middle,
right?
And it hits, and I don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
Holding dead still solves a lot of those problems, doesn't it?
Yeah, right. So now I'm like, well, that's true. Whenever your pin doesn't move, you can get away with a lot, right? But now that I know, one day it might not, and the next day I might have some movement, and that shows up everything. So like then you realize, holy crap, if I make just a kind of a subpar shot, I missed by 2 inches. That's not acceptable. We're trying to hit a dot that's this big every time, and it's like, I got to have a bow that is torque tuned perfectly, that is my sight picture's perfect. I need every point I can get out there now, where used to it was just like, I can take that bow, whatever. I'll point it in the middle and hit the middle. And like what he said, he used to be like, ignorance is bliss, dude. I remember him telling me that, But the problem was, I didn't know a lot about building bows when I was 19 and 20. I just knew how to shoot them. And so now I've, for the last 16, 17 years, I've learned what causes these things to happen, what causes that in your sight picture, what causes that in your execution. So now I'm like, okay, I'm struggling with that. And now I know, and I'm like, I got to fix it, because then your confidence is shot. So I just think the more you learn, the more you know, the more you understand how important little things are, especially in the
world. And the more you know, the faster you can get from A to Z. The faster you can get from I remember when we used to go to tournament, take 2 weeks to get sight tapes, right? And then you go to tournament like Reading and it's off. Like, we're adjusting limb poundage to get your gap back on, which is jacks your tune up. That would make my head spin nowadays. But there's just so many advancements like software programs and things like that that help you get from A to Z a lot faster. Probably, I say that the sight tape programs are probably the biggest invention for archery since, other than the rangefinder. And so it's just like, that is an overwhelming thing to me. And one of the things that I really want to be a part of fixing in this industry, because once you solve that, man, I mean, so many people go out in the field hunting and they just miss, and they think they just missed, and they don't realize that this piece of device that you're trusting, it's always, my mantra is always trust and verify. Okay.
Right.
I know what I know because I've tried this. The reason I shoot a gated jaw release is because I can tell the difference from shooting all these different releases. I don't know why. I remember the very first time I shoot this Carter Hole thing for years, right? And Carter came out with a BK target. They're both double sear thumb button releases, right? One would think that there ain't two shakes of difference between them. But I'm standing at the range and I'm shooting groups like this at 30 yards with ACEs with my whole thing, and groups like this with the other one over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm like, what could I possibly be doing different? It's the release. It's something in the release on how you hold it consistently, and it may not happen to another person based on how they fire the shot. You know, I've always felt like index finger releases and hooks. I'm just adamantly against hooks on releases and any tension on the actual hook itself, because I know my own personal weaknesses. Okay, my biggest weakness shooting wise is creeping, right? So if I'm creeping on a release that requires the exact same tension to break consistently, because it's like a mini finger release. The reason they shoot through a clicker is they want the same tension all the way through. Well, I analyze all this stuff. I talk to Brady Ellison a lot. I've learned a lot of things from all different aspects of archery and able to apply them to my own game and understand what works for me. Okay. A person like Michael Braden that hooks the trigger and has 4, 5, 6, 8 pounds of trigger pull is shooting a different shot with the same release. That would never work for me because I maybe have a little softer tension one time than the next, and a gated jaw that has no influence over the loop leaving the jaw is a more forgiving setup. Okay. And I just can't accept. Now, I'm actually shooting a hook style jaw for hunting because in hunting, a lot of times you have to, what's most accurate is not most practical. You know what I'm saying? And so you try to solve the problems of the competition or the hunt. You build your gear based around what you're doing that gives you the best chance for success. And I just think about all the scenarios where if I could have loaded a little faster, if I didn't think about it, or I needed a multi-pin sight versus a single pin sight. I'm not going to concede that single pin sights hunting are more accurate, but having 6 or 7 pins there to be able to make a quick decision and quick execution is much more valuable to me in a hunting situation. So when you're dealing with equipment, I think, that's always been my specialty, is just, I can't take a knife to a gunfight. Okay. I am going to maximize everything within my power to try to win that tournament. What we're going to cover this weekend on Hammer's Hack is kind of knock point setup and knock fit, right? So I see a lot of different things, and I see a lot of different people make comments about leaving they leave a gap under their nock. So, let me get closer to the camera. So, so that it doesn't pinch. But one thing people don't understand is once you touch the string off, once you touch it off, you have no more control over that. And that string is kind of recovering from here to here. If you have any vertical nock travel in your bow system, that nock can be sliding up or down. And I learned this shooting a shooting machine. If I had any gap spread in my nock point, it would string arrows vertically. So if you look real close here, let me see if I can get real close to the camera. Okay. I tie a nock set like this. So I got a little bit more above the arrow than I do below the arrow, or a little more below the arrow than above. Okay. That's important in terms of creating down pressure and eliminating some of that pinch. And it creates a bigger, flatter area on the string. So when you have sharper string angle, you don't have as hard of a pinch. Okay. On nock fit, Knock fit's real critical. And I'm going to do a video here probably today later on lighted knocks. And we're going to talk about some of the different types of lighted knocks. And one of the problems I see with some of them is the fact that they have a plunger in them, right? And so when you touch that knock off, all of a sudden you have this massive amount of back and forth play in that thing all over the place. It's not holding the knock right against the throat of the string all the way through the shot cycle. And these gold tip knocks, and I use this mini HD pin knock almost for everything, but most of our knocks are all made this way. They kind of up the string like this, and then they flare it from all angles. So that's important because it holds the knock up against the string all the way through the shot cycle. And when you're setting your knock fit up, I don't know how many times I've fielded the call over the years. So like, hey, do you have a knock that fits my bowstring? And I stopped for a second. I said, I'll tell you what, a knock mold costs $20,000 and a piece of string serving costs $1. What do you think I'm going to recommend? Okay. People have to learn how to work on their own bows. People are afraid of it, and pro shops, they're just sometimes the pro shops in this country are dumbed down to the 30-yard whitetail bow hunter, and they just don't have the knowledge base, nor do they care, nor can they spend enough time. So if you don't take personal responsibility for your own stuff, you're never going to have it optimal, right? So what you're looking for in knock fit is, number one, I want to be able to rotate this string in the throat of the knock without it pushing the arrow around, okay? That tells you it's loose enough, right? Another standard you can use is simply to draw the string back 1/2 inch and let go. If that knock leaves cleanly, and I mean cleanly, not jerky, just cleanly comes off, then your knock fits proper, okay? Too tight a knocks can really rob accuracy, and I think a lot of, bow hunters with not much experience, they like that. I want my knock to snap on the string because I don't want it to come off. You don't want too tight of a knock. And the lower your poundage, if you're a woman or a light poundage bow hunter, the lighter your arrow is, the lighter that knock fit's got to be, because you want to make sure it's coming off with the least amount of effort. So that's Hammer's Hacks for the second episode of the Archery Ops Podcast.
Love it. It's just true. Very, very true.
Well, that's our second episode with Levi Morgan. And I think you guys, if you follow this Archery Ops Podcast, you're going to pick up a lot of little tips and tricks. You're going to, delve into, what makes people successful in all aspects of archery and bow hunting. We're going to bring guests to you that, they may not be the best archers. Maybe they're an expert in another field. And we're just hope to entertain and hope to educate people, with this podcast. And I think we've had a good, successful one here. Hey, before you go, there's a great way to get even more info and tips. Follow this podcast and check out Gold Tip on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for listening. And as always, start tough and stay true.